Welcome back. We're talking about the state budget and the $25 billion hole that the nonpartisan LAO expects this year, and the annual $20 billion deficits the LAO projects for the foreseeable future. While politically unpalatable, many nonpartisan observers maintain that revenues of some type, whether tax increases, perhaps direct user fees, might be part of the rational solution to fill these staggering budget gaps. So the question for you, Assemblymember Arambula, is, can the public handle that truth?
I don't know, but it'd be nice to find out. I don't think we elected officials have been very direct or honest with the voters, and I don't know how they would react, but my view is that most voters want to see some balance between reductions and additional revenues.
You were mentioning in the last segment that, you know, voters kind of want to have it both ways. They want the benefits that the state may have to offer, but they just don't want to pay for them, or they don't realize the cost of those benefits.
Well, we've cried wolf so many times that the public just doesn't believe us anymore. And we've somehow muddled through year after year after year. But we've gotten to the point where we just need to be honest with the voters and say, this is what we can afford. Unless you're willing to support revenues for other services, that's all we're going to provide. And then leave it up to the voters, because ultimately they're the ones that make those decisions.
Well, Senator Cogdill, let me ask you something. The Bakersfield, California has editorialized that a no new tax pledge is, quote, essentially a refusal to cooperate in any meaningful way in budget talks, unquote. Now, we have a new Republican Assembly leader from here in the Valley, Connie Conway of Visalia, and she's ruled out any tax increases. So how do we solve the problem?
Well, again, I think certainly politically it's understandable when you look at the results in this last election.
Even Governor Brown seemed to understand that.
Right. Well, and as you know, throughout his campaign, that was part of his rather limited platform, in my opinion, but his comment that he made time and time again is that I won't raise taxes without voter approval. So that seems to be where he will ultimately have to go here. But again, I think the voters were, you know, following the election in May of 2009, when they rejected the February 2009 budget deal that I and Mike Valines negotiated, that had for the first time a real spending limit and a rainy day fund as part of a compromise. But in order to get that, they would have needed to extend the temporary tax increases an additional 2 years. 28% of the registered voters, which is about 50% of the adults, the eligible voters in this state, turned out to cast a vote on that question and overwhelmingly rejected it. That has led into where we are now. Again, they stood up with Proposition 26 that would have said you can no longer raise fees,
right,
let alone taxes, but you can't raise fees now without a 2/3 vote. They approved that. So they're making it harder and harder to raise fees and taxes,
sounds like the voters are saying,
in general.
deal with it.
Exactly. I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. In their minds, they believe we're still wasting huge amounts of money, and that we need to be more efficient, and that the cuts need to take place, and you can do that and still provide us with the services we demand.
You know, and Mark, I think the voters are willing to support increases. Here in Fresno, 74+% of the voters voted for a bond measure for Fresno Unified, because they felt that they knew what they were going to get.
Right.
They saw test scores going up. They had a reason to come out.
They want to see a connection between what they're paying and what they're getting for it.
Yes, I think if voters are convinced that it will result in an improvement for our communities and our families, they will support it. They're just not buying it right now.
It's like the extension of Measure C.
Right, the transportation tax. I want to ask you, you've been around politics a long time, Congressman Costa. Now, Governor-elect Brown seems to think that he can persuade Republicans to raise the taxes that they loathe and Democrats to agree to cut programs that they cherish. Do you think he can pull it off?
Well, it's the new and improved Jerry Brown, and we'll see. You know, I've had a working relationship with him since I was in the legislature, and I think he brings a talent and a savvy that is a lot of years of experience. But the legislators aren't the same group of folks that he worked with when I was there. Term limits have changed, all of that. And I think he's going to have his work cut out for him.
Okay, well, one other question I wanted to ask before we end this segment, and that is about the selling of state assets. The LAO has reported that it's probably not a very good idea. The bottom line will end up equaling a cost of a 10% interest rate by selling these buildings. So, you know, why are we moving forward with that if it's not a good idea financially?
Short-term fix. It's about getting some dollars in the budget this year. Long-term, it's not a good idea. It's borrowing money at some of the highest interest rates you could anticipate. Again, long term, it's not a good idea, but we do an awful lot of that, unfortunately.
Okay.
It's like selling your house and then renting and agreeing to increase the rent going forward.
Maybe not a good idea.
The lack is long-term planning, both at the state and the federal level, and that's what we got to do.
Okay, well, up next, we're going to talk about that. How would reform in the state budgets help California and get us back on track? That conversation when we return. This is the Maddy Report.